Deontay Wilder's outburst wasn't about selling his fight with Chisora. It was real. It exposed the mental costs of boxing. When fighters lose their their perfect record, they don't just lose their belts, they lose their identity. Many boxers are left without the tools to mentally recover. Sports psychotherapist Gary Bloom joins The Hook to explain why boxers need a strong ego to survive, but why that same ego makes it harder to fall. In a sport with a conveyor belt of new talent, no established union, and no support post-retirement, it can feel like they're heading into the abyss. Boxing can't ignore this any longer. It needs to act now. The first topic is Deontay Wilder's outburst. Before I tell you my side of things and almost lead the witness, I want to get your opinion on your take of that outburst from Deontay Wilder.
I think boxers, and Johnny will know better than anybody, have this thin veneer that if you break through it, especially in a public setting, on a radio station, TV station, or a weigh-in or something like that, I think you're in very dangerous territory. So I'm not surprised. He was publicly, I think he thought Simon was trying to publicly humiliate him. So that's the ego being challenged, the ego of what you stand for and what you do, and being trashed by a radio journalist, and he reacted accordingly. I didn't see anything that unusual about that, because if I were to do that to you or Johnny, if I did it to Johnny, I'd probably run. If anybody did that to me, I'd be really angry.
I think one of the things with Deontay Wilder is everybody's been talking about the fact, especially the last couple of times we've seen him in fights, he's been more mellow than himself. He's always been a fiery character that would jump on people's words and fight back, whereas the last couple of times we've seen him, he's been very reserved. This almost felt like it was bringing out an old version of Deontay Wilder. What did you make of it, Johnny?
Well, Deontay was over here to promote a fight. And so to promote the fight, he's trying to present his new persona, the new version of him, but let people know I'm still that dangerous fighter, I'm still Bomb Squad, I'm still the guy that can do this. But also remember, a lot of the times in his interviews, he was talking about a lot of stuff that's happening in his personal life. And if you're a fighter or not, everybody, if you're suffering, you're stress at home, it's going to manifest itself in some way, shape or form. Deontay's clearly still in a relationship with that sadness that's in his life, because that's all he spoke about, even when he was never asked. So that spills over to how he thinks people are looking at him, how they're talking to him, how they're, as far as he's concerned, disrespecting him. And remember, if you're a former world heavyweight champion, you've got to have the arrogance. If you really believe you were the best in the world, you've got to have the arrogance to believe you're the toughest man amongst 8 billion people on this earth. Now that sounds like something funny to say, but you've got to really believe that. So if you've lived that life and you thought, I am the baddest man on the planet, nobody can touch me, then all of a sudden it's taken away, you now have got to live in a new reality. As I say, I'm just like everybody else. How am I going to manage this? And that alone, away from all the normal things that you got to do, like go shopping or put petrol in your car or do the normal things we got to do, that alone will completely mess you up. And the ego can be your biggest supporter, but you can be your biggest enemy as well.
What do you think about that, Gary, in terms of an ego for a boxer? Because boxers typically do have to have the biggest egos to be able to mentally put themselves in a position where they have to go into a ring, which is one of the most dangerous sports. You have to mentally believe more so than potentially other sports.
The both of you are very right. I mean, the ego involved on, I can't think of another sport like boxing where there is a clear live wire ego thing from the boxers, which is so strong. I mean, I'm just thinking about the number of boxers who call their children the same name as themselves. Chris Eubank, I'm thinking about Joe Bugner. Why
George
would
Foreman.
you do that? That is indication of what is going on in their personality. And that, I would argue, is a thin veneer of something that if you crack through, I've said it before here, if you crack through that, it's like a piece of ice. When you crack through it, it's dangerous.
Talking of cracking through, that kind of takes us on to our second point, which is losing losing that perfect record. It's something that we speak a lot about in boxing. There's people, the Floyd Mayweathers of the world, that have set this standard of having a perfect record, and everybody wants to attain that. And when they don't, and when they lose that O, it can be really difficult to get their heads round to begin with. From a fighter's perspective, what does it feel like in dealing with a loss and coming to terms with a loss?
Well, I think having a no, that's extra pressure on you, because every time you get in the ring, you know that pressure's on. That's what people are looking at. I think nowadays, they always are more of a commercial thing than anything else. Commercially, they want you to be that unbeaten giant that can never be beaten. For the fighter, you have ups and downs in the gym in preparation. You deal with that. When it happens publicly, you've got to swallow that. So if you're living up to this persona that you've got, I'm an unbeaten fighter, and that's what you sell yourself on. That's what you shout loud and proud about. When the pressure is on you, constantly getting in the ring, amongst everything else that all other fighters have. So losing the O, that is more of an embarrassment, an ego trip, and it's very hard to deal with if that's what you lived on. I know, I can remember when Naz was unbeaten, and I think when he first lost to Barrera, that changed him. It changed him, and that changed the appetite, the hunger, the attitude. But the ego's still there, and your ego still wants you to treat him like a god. Your ego's there and wants you to treat you like you're still the best fighter on the planet, but the ego's gone. So mentally, again, it's a mental crossroads for every sportsman and woman when that O's gone. It's hard to deal with because you're now paranoid. You're thinking everybody's mocking you, laughing at you, taking a mickey out of you.
I always think about it, I mean, I've never fought, so I can't really speak to it too much, but do you think, Gary, that losing the O is almost a form of grieving that person that you thought you were, that invincible aura that you have around you? Do you think there's almost a period of grief that comes with losing an O?
I think it's a bit more, it's really complex, to be honest, because the quality of the fights you're given early on in your career, eventually you're going to come up against decent opposition. But in sports psychology, we call it catastrophic thinking, that you're the best or you're worst, or you're the worst. And the truth is, for any sportsman in most sports, you're somewhere between the two. So this idea that you're invincible and cannot be beaten, I think is a really strange psychological state, because it doesn't happen in football, rugby, cricket, or any other sport. Sometimes you have a bad day, even a great football team or a great cricket team, you're going to have a bad day and lose, and it's normal to get over that. And the other thing I'd say, Charlotte, is you learn very little from winning every fight. The times that you do learn something as a sportsman or woman is when you lose. Because if you're knocking your opponents out every time you're paired against somebody, what do you learn? So I think losing is good, because you might learn something about your technique, you might learn something about your mental preparation, you might learn something about all sorts of things. Were you mentally prepared for the fight? So I find boxing quite odd, if I'm honest. This idea of keeping the O is somehow sacred, because we're all going to get beaten at some day, and you, me, and Johnny, we're all going to have bad days.
Looking at both of these points, they kind of go in with each other, because one of the things that really wound Wilder up in that conversation with Simon Jordan was the fact that he kept bringing it back to the Tyson Fury fights that he had, and the fact that he had lost to Tyson Fury.
It's a trigger. He kept going back to that moment.
But then he was also talking about the fact that he was calling Wilder's excuses weak and saying that he wasn't kind of taking accountability for the losses. Do you think when you lose, psychology-wise, you have to almost say there was a reason? He was saying that Tyson cheated.
It needs a justification.
Yeah.
So I didn't really lose. I only lost because he cheated, or because my boots were too big, or my laces weren't tight. So you need a justification. So that's you denying it to yourself. And most fighters, they know before anybody else if things are right, if they've prepped right, if they're slipping a little bit, but they don't think anybody else can see it. So then when it's public, your ego's talking, oh no, that wasn't me, that's because he did X, Y, Z. And it's very hard to actually deal with that, because boxing is the only place you can legally get killed. I know that's a bit gruesome. It's dangerous. You're going in there to hurt somebody. So it's not like football. It's not like anything else. You're going in directly to hurt somebody. So therefore, you've got to get yourself in a mental state where you think it's fight or flight. And so you cannot go in there, half-heartedly.
Yeah.
You've got to go in there full log. So when Simon Jordan is kind of putting the pressure on Deontay Wilder, he's talking to this guy's ego, and this ego, he's not even dealt with his ego. He's not even checked it. He's still got every single excuse for why that happened back then. And he's not accepting it yet. It won't be until he's retired and 10 years down the line and he's older and he's had time to get himself out of that mindset to think, I get it. But at this moment in time, he's still an active fighter. So therefore, his ego is still well and truly alive.
There's a really important point here that if you are a sportsman or woman and you have a loss, the important thing, we call it the 3 steps. You've got to first admit that you've lost. Then you've got to work out why you've lost. And the 3rd step is you've got to forget about it. And then if those 3 steps are not completed, you'll do it again. Now, if you're saying, well, it didn't really happen, it was too hot, too cold, it was this, and you're not getting to that point where you're working out why you were defeated. And then the most important of those 3 steps, then you have to forget about it and move on.
So, in your professional opinion, then, would you say that someone like Deontay, if he's not accepting the fact that he lost to Tyson Fury, that he's going to struggle to get past it and struggle to almost come back into form because he hasn't let go of what happened in the past?
So what happens in that situation? It's a really good question, actually, Charlotte. What happens is your next big fight, you're looking for the reasons around you before you get into the ring. Why, if you are going to lose, you're going to lose. So this is too heavy, that's too this, the walk-in is too this. You're already focusing on the wrong things because you haven't dealt with what happened last time. And if you're constantly looking for what I would call distractions, which happen in all sports, you're going to not be at your mentally at your best. What you have to, the big thing is that you have to concentrate on is the fight, not whether your costume's too heavy or the music's too loud or this isn't right. But that is somebody who has not recognized why they've lost in a previous time.
And you've also got to remember, when you get to that stage, you've got people around there that are never going to tell you how it is. They're never going to tell you how it is because they want to stay in that circle. Yeah. So therefore, they're not going to be straight talking with you saying, listen, you lost because of X, Y, Z. So you get more people saying yes than no. More people saying you're doing it right than doing it wrong. And so when that's the case, instead of that, to avoid that, the most important thing is surrounding yourself with the right people that will talk to you straight, the right people who've got the experience, the right people that have seen it in the same story, different actors, and they're the ones that can talk to you and make you understand and see it, because the only way you get wisdom is through experiences, both good and bad. You've got to have bad experiences as well as good experiences to get wisdom. And in the sport of boxing, when you lose and when you win, as Gary said, you need that. You need to understand, you know what, I can deal with this. The greatest fighters in the world have lost. Ali, Sugar Ray Robinson, they've all lost. Jack Johnson, they've all lost. But they still are our history makers in our sport because they've seen every shape and size of our sport.
Gary, you mentioned about embarrassment, which I thought was quite an interesting topic when it comes to losing the O. Now, in today's world, social media, people can be on you straight away. So beforehand, it might have been in the newspaper in the morning or something like that. And then, as they say, the newspaper the next day is used for fish and chips. But social media, they can directly target you and speak to you and say what they want to say about you. Do you think it's harder now for boxers to deal with losing than it was before?
Well, that's what I work with in my practice, to say to sportsmen and women who have had a bad day, what are you looking at that stuff for? You are drinking from a toxic pond. So if you know that you've had a bad day at the office, why would you go on social media, on Instagram or Twitter or whatever it is? Why would you want to take that stuff into your persona, into your energy? If I had a bad fight and I knew I had a bad fight, I wouldn't look at that stuff. And that's what I encourage my clients not to go there. It's dangerous because it will mess with your head. Now, why would you want to take something into your body that's going to mess with your head?
It's also human nature as well. I could tell you 100.
It's so hard to stay away from it.
You could be told 100 things positive, and 99 will be positive, and 1 will be negative. And 9 times out of 10,
right.
you would focus on the 1 negative. So it's human nature. So it doesn't matter if you're a sportsman or woman. It's human nature. So you've got to. What Brendan used to do with us, he'd say, I'd call them armchair champions. So these armchair champions are the greatest trainer, the greatest fighter, the biggest puncher, the smartest boxer. So these armchair champions are telling you what you should have done, how you should have done it. Now, so you've got to think to yourself, well, you haven't done it. We can all be smart. In hindsight, so you've got to look at them, even when they say nice things about you, because that's how they suck you in. They say, "Oh my God, John, you're brilliant, you're a don," and you're thinking, you don't even know me. But those same people, you've listened to when it's good, so therefore you're going to listen to when it's bad. So you've got to be, it's human nature. You've got to be strong enough to either completely blank it or just smile and take something nice with, as you would take something nasty.
What was it like for you, Johnny? Because I know you've said before, I think it was the Leon fight afterwards, that you felt like everyone turned against you. What does it feel like when the public and those people that were once supporting you and raising you up are no longer by your side when you suffer a loss? Lonely, dark, and we all need a Brendan. Mine was Brendan. You need somebody to talk to. You need somebody to explain the unexplainable that's in your head, because if you don't, it will drive you insane. And I remember that period of time, and Brendan did something so smart, so sharp, so clever, and he put an advert in a local newspaper a few weeks after the De Leon fight, where the whole city had turned against me, and he said Johnny Nelson's going to train for his next fight. He's willing to pay £700 to anybody that'll come and spar with him for a week. And I thought it was another one of Brendan's stunts. He put it in the paper on the Friday. On the Sunday, I got to the gym. The gym was packed out, and I forgot about this advert that he'd put in. And I saw people that I'd even seen in the street. I'm like, all right, and they're saying hello. I couldn't understand what they were saying. Brendan, why are these people here? They've answered the ad. I'm like, oh my! I was upset, and 2 or 3 of them got in. Didn't last around. But it was Brendan's way of lifting me to say, these are the people you are letting get to you. And the people that are doing the talking, let them just talk, because not everybody can do it. Yeah. So you need somebody that you can speak to you, that gets you to pull you out of that. Otherwise, if you go down that rabbit hole, it will destroy you. Talking about pulling you out of it, Gary, with losses, particularly knockouts or bad defeats, like, for example, Deontay Wilder with that Tyson Fury, is it beneficial mentally to go back and watch that and relive that? Because I know some boxers like to go back and tactically analyse it and try and figure out where it went wrong and go through the footage, and some don't like to look at it at all and think about it again. What would you say is beneficial mentally for a boxer?
It's too general a question, Charlotte. Everybody's different. And for some people, they want to forget about it and never see it again. I think if you're working with sort of a good psychologist, I think doing nothing for a few days, I certainly wouldn't encourage any boxer to go back and hit the go button or the play button quickly after the defeat. But I think this is true of all sport. Our brains and minds are designed to take a little while to process something that's negative. It's just not possible to suddenly deal with the disappointment of something big. And we can think about our personal lives, the end of a relationship or a parent dying or something like that. You can't get over it in a couple of days. And something that is so crushing to your own ego, where you're right at the top of your sport, needs time to process, in my opinion. But as I said at the start of my answer, everybody's different.
We'll move on to number 3. Retirement for a lot of boxers is quite a scary prospect. Derek Chisora, in his last fight in Manchester, he cried when he walked into the arena because he thought that was the last time he was going to fight in the UK. He's now having to deal with those emotions. Johnny, from your perspective as a fighter, why is it so daunting retiring?
I cried too. Once the words come out of your mouth, it's real. You probably know at the back of your mind, my time's up. But once you say it, that's it. I can remember. I think I was doing a live interview on the BBC, and the reporter said, "Well, what will you do when you retire?" And I broke down in tears. I'm like, what am I doing? I couldn't, because the reality it was like a massive downfall. And it's very hard because it's what you've done all your life. You've surrounded yourself. You've had the opportunity to be a child as an adult. Take no responsibility for everyday life. You're going to miss being in the gym. You're going to miss having that period where you've always got something to restrict you from drinking, eating, or doing whatever too much. That's something that's taken over your whole life, your whole thought process. So for you to be taken out of that, I can understand Derek completely. For you to be taken out of that, it's scary because you don't know what you're going to do. And the problem is, a lot of fighters carry on fighting for far too long. And that's where you have governing bodies that stand up and say, give me a license for your own health, for your own good. And Derek, if Derek's having the conversation now, now's the time you should walk away. If you haven't, once you start the conversation in your head, it's time.
Yeah. I feel like with boxers as well, they always have that conversation a little bit later. So when they are talking about it, it really is time. Yeah. Gary, with that, what Johnny just said there, do you see it as a loss of identity then when boxers decide to walk away from the sport?
Yeah, I mean, there's an interesting thing that I remember learning when I was at college. Sportsmen retire twice. Most of us just retire once. They retire for when they finish their sport, and then they go off and do something else, TV pundit, whatever they do, and then they retire again in their 60s or 70s. They are massive gear changes. I don't know if you know, but the vast majority of people, and especially men, who retire from their jobs at age 60, the percentage of men who then go on to lead healthy lives and have a long retirement, it's very small. And I think that we can learn that from sportsmen and women who retire, because you need to plan something. And I would be saying to a client who came to me with Chisora's dilemma, what have you planned? What's the next step of the journey? And I suspect the answer is not very much. Well, I'll do this, well, I'll do that, well, I've got plenty of money, I don't need to do anything. No, that's why those men in their 60s and 70s, when they retire, don't last very long, because they haven't planned what they're going to do. And even having a small part-time job or whatever, the mental stimulation that brings is important. As Johnny was saying, all this excitement and the lives have been pumped up into these maybe 10, 15, 20 fights. That's gone. And the adrenaline rush and the cortisol in your brain suddenly is not getting that big rush anymore. We call it the sugar rush. Once that sugar rush has gone from your life, it's very hard to adapt or get it back.
Do you think that's why a lot of athletes, boxers in particular, turn to alcohol, turn to drugs, turn to gambling, because they're trying to chase that high again?
Without a doubt. Boxing trains you to do one of two things: be a coach or stand on the door of a pub. It doesn't train you for anything else. So therefore, if you're not a good coach and you don't want to stand on the door of a club, you're thinking, I've spent all my life doing this and I'm good at it, I was good at it, I'm lost. I felt like a 38-year-old school leaver when I retired from boxing, because I thought, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? Fortunately, I fell into the media side of it and talking about something I do. But then you realise, as a fighter, you think the whole world is into boxing. But in reality, you're 1%, and the people you surround yourself, if they're not boxing people, they've no idea what you're talking about. So you're completely lost. And so this period now, that's why you're still looking for that rush: drink, drugs, it could be domestic issues, it could be gambling, all because you're chasing that rush, that endorphin rush that boxing gave you, that fear factor of going in the ring thinking, oh my God, what's going to happen here? Yeah. And you're chasing that to the point where you've got nothing left. Where you've damaged yourself, you've damaged your home life, you've damaged your social circle, because you're chasing that rush that only boxing gives you. Nothing else does.
When the fighters are coming through and developing, they create a whole group of people around them, including their main, maybe romantic relationship, all based on the fact that they are a boxer. I'm going to be your mate because you're a boxer. I'm going to marry you because you've got this money and you're going to be a boxer, and I'm going to have this fame and I'm going to do all this. And then all of a sudden that goes, the number of relationships that break up when sportsmen and women end their careers is staggering, because they fell in love with the persona of that person, and then that persona goes, and then what?
That's the same in most sports. That's the same in most sports
Yeah,
because it's too. There's two identities,
Yeah.
and so when you're no longer that sportsman or woman, that's it, no longer doing that job. Your relationship, your interaction. I got divorced once I'd finished boxing because I was at home all the time, and I wasn't involved in the running of a home. I wasn't involved in the normal everyday things. So when I'm there, I'm like, well, where's my place? What am I doing?
Yeah.
And this is the same with most people that have been in sport. They've got to adjust to civilian life. And I know that sounds really a bit much. They've got to adjust to civilian life. And if they can't, that's where the problem starts.
We speak there about family life and the environment, but for a boxer, is it easier to walk away from the sport because you're injured, or is it easier to walk away because it's the right time? Because I feel like with boxers, obviously, if you choose when you leave, you have an element of planning to it and you can prepare for it, but it's very hard to let go, whereas an injury almost forces you out the door.
Yeah.
What do you think is easier to cope with?
If it's your choice to walk, then you can handle it. If it's not your choice, you cannot handle it. Mine was injury. I struggled for probably 5 years. Even though probably before the injury I thought, I'm going to retire here soon. But mine was injury because it's taken away from you. But when it's your choice, then you think, I'm still in control of some aspect of my life. And that's why a lot of people still struggle.
You said struggle there. What does struggle look like? What is that, an internal battle?
Internally, you're paranoid, your confidence is low. You think, where's my place in life? My vocabulary is boxing. I can talk and converse and hold my own about nothing else. This is what happens, and you think you're alone. Unless you're surrounded by other fighters, which you're no longer alone because you're not at the gym anymore. That's the effect, and there's also the physical effect. The hits in the head, you're forgetting your memory is going, the aches and pains, and you think it's just happening to you. So all these things piled into one, then it's like it's a recipe for disaster because you think you're on your own.
I'm going to move us on to number 5. Toxic environment. So we brought this one up because with Deontay Wilder, again, he was talking about the fact that he lost his spite and he lost his aggression because of things that were going on outside of the ring, that it had nothing to do with his physical performance, that it was based on his mental situation. How detrimental can external factors, Gary, like things that are going on with family or friends or people close to you, be to your performance in the ring?
This is my favourite subject, if I'm honest, Charlotte, because that's what the job of a psychotherapist is, to recognise that you have to bring the best of yourself to a particular sport to be successful. And just dealing with what's in the ring, to me, is sport psychology. Dealing with what's going on outside the ring is psychotherapy, because I treat my clients holistically. I'm looking at all aspects of their life, not just what's going on when they put a pair of gloves on. So this is why psychotherapy, and you probably say, well, you would say that, Gary. This is why it works, because when you deal with the whole individual, happier boxers box better. Happier bus conductors work better. Happier players play better is the buzz line of the book I wrote. You have to be happy in yourself to provide the energy to do well. We had a sign on the door at a football club I worked at, and it said this: you are responsible for the energy that you bring inside this building. And that is it. You are responsible as a boxer for the energy you bring into a ring. And if you're having domestic issues or health issues or issues with your kids, you're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Gary's to Brendan.
Yeah.
Do you understand? As I said, you need Gary's. You need your
I'm
Brendan.
nowhere near as good as him, Johnny.
You need those people that can talk to you, that get you, that can read you, that have got a selfless interest in you. And so you're going to trust their word. you're gonna listen to what they're saying, and it's today's society, especially here in the UK, it's kind of frowned upon getting a Gary, getting a Brendan, because it's a sign of weakness. But in reality now, sportsmen and women need to understand they need that mental outlet, because in our sport, it's the lonely sport in the world.
Yeah. Talking of lonely sport, and you mentioned it earlier, paranoia. One of the topics that was about Deontay Wilder was he mentioned the fact that family had stolen from him in that time, and that he was getting particularly paranoid about the people that were around him. And I know the bigger you get in boxing, his circumstance obviously was with family, but the bigger you get in boxing, the wider your circle normally becomes. Can someone like Deontay trust the people around him again? You know, will that paranoia stay with him because of his lived experience of what happened?
I think it's very hard once you've lost trust in an individual or a family, a group of friends, group of coaches. It's very hard to win it back. And if your belief is they are acting against your best interests, where do you go from there? Now, the truth is most sportsmen, and Johnny will know this, are concentrate utterly and completely on their sport. And what they're looking for is a group of people who can look after their money, look after their emotional well-being. And that is the bedrock of allowing them then to go on and do their sport well and participate well. But once you've lost the foundations of the building, the rest of the building's going to fall down. And those people are the foundation. I call it the bubble of your life. Who are the people who would be there to rescue you if you were in trouble? They are your inner bubble. If you don't trust your inner bubble, you're in trouble. And I think it's really important. I was talking to a client this morning. Who are the key people? Well, you have to trust those people and say, if I was if I was a boxer and I was seriously injured, who would be there to look after me? Now, if you think the people who are meant to look after you aren't going to be there to look after you, you've got a serious problem.
Do you think, Johnny, that teams are getting too big now, that the core group should just stay the same and keep it tight and connected? But there's too much, what do they call them? It's like social leeches is the word that's been spun around.
I call them ninjas. They only turn up when the sun's out, when it's good times, and when it's bad times, they disappear. But yeah.
Johnny, do you know what the ninja stands for?
Go on.
No income, no job.
There you go. There you go. And the problem in this situation, these are young men and women. So you've got young ideas. You're not thinking about tomorrow. I want my mates around me. I want them to have a good laugh. I want us all to enjoy this and enjoy the ride. And it's great. It's great when you're young, but then as you get older and all of a sudden, you know, their interest, unless it's the same as yours, unless it's as obsessive as yours, you need to surround yourself with like-minded people, because if you don't, those same people, those ninjas that are there when the sun's out, those same people are gonna sour your view on everybody else. I look at Deontay and look at the things he's saying. I think it's really sad, because family was there before boxing, family is there after boxing, but unfortunately things are said or done that really hurt. And it's not until he's walked away from our game, and you're going to be years down the line, where he'll be able to have peace and think, you know what, that was just a period of my life. He's still in it. Yeah. And so I'm 59 years old, so I see him, and so I get where he's at, but I understand where he'll be when he's my age. I'll understand when he's 50 years old. He'll be out of it, his mindset will be completely different.
Family dynamic is a really interesting one in sport as well. One of the big talking points, especially in heavyweight boxing, is the relationship between Daniel Dubois and his dad and the dynamic in the gym. I'd be interested to know, Gary, your take on it from an external point of view rather than in the boxing world as such, that Daniel is very reliant on his father, that he has to have him there to be able to listen to instruction or be motivated in a certain way that other people can't bring out of him. And of course, there's positives to that it will, you know, bring out performances from him, but also it can undermine coaches, and he may struggle without the presence of his father. What does that dynamic kind of say to you?
I have a very strong view about this, that no parent should coach a child at any sport, because it's mixing up two really powerful relationships. and the relationship between the coach and the athlete, and the relationship between a parent and the athlete should be boundaried. They're completely different relationships. And if you are, we all wanted to please our dads when we were little. How can you go into a ring wanting to please your dad? And if you get beaten, what does that do to your relationship with your dad? And the textbook sports psychology view is that no parent should be a coach. The parent should help the promising young athlete find the right coach for them, and then they have to step away and allow the athlete to develop without the pressure or glare of a parental relationship.
He's good. He's good. Brendan parents were not allowed in the gym. And so because when kids came in the gym and the parents would want on a Saturday morning and the parents would want to come and watch little Tommy hitting the bag, Brendan would say, no, out you go. Because little Tommy will always stay little Tommy as long as you're here. I want this young man to be responsible for what he does and what he does good and what he does bad. Out. Parents had to stay outside on the pavement outside until the session was over before they came in, and because that relationship, just as Gary said, that relationship is soiled because it's your father as well as your. And there's one or two successful relationships where fighters and fathers have gotten well and have reached the heights of the high, but there's one or two relationships where there's lines that have been crossed which will be detrimental to that relationship for the rest. Wilfred Benitez, his parents. To my understanding, his parents ran the financial side of his career. The young man ended up with nothing. There's a split, a fallout in the family. And look at what's happening with Deontay, and he's I'm quite sure he'd have hired his brother or whatever. I'm assuming hired his brother or other to work for him. But then you're mixing the two. You've got to keep them separate because if you don't, what will happen is your reality is all gone. Because when you want to rest and step away from it, you're still in it. There's no respite. There's no relax. And so, where's your peace? Where's your happiness?
Yeah, it's a hard one to balance. I'm going to take us on to our last one, which is a question mark. So it is, what boxing must change? It's quite a big question to tackle. I mean, we could probably do the whole show on our opinions on this one. But Johnny, I'm going to start with you as a fighter yourself. What would be the biggest thing that you think could change in boxing?
Aftercare and structure. Now, boxing is an individual sport where individuals profit. I've been working on this for like two or 3 years because I was fortunate enough to be very fortunate to do something with Barry Hearn. Set me up with a pension I didn't even know, and I thought, and I was fortunate at 55. I got a pension from my income, and I didn't even know it existed. As a parent, would I encourage my child to go into boxing for a career? No, I wouldn't. I'd go for their well-being, not for a career. So I'm in the process. 2 years in, we're almost there. We're setting up a boxer's savings scheme where there's structuring, where there's aftercare, there's help, there's advice. Boxers would put a percentage of their purse into a savings scheme that they own, that comes to fruition when they're 40 years old. And if they want to invest it on, they invest it on. If they don't, they don't. It's only 5% of their purse. It belongs to nobody else, but it's a must that they have to do it. So the boxing board, all the governing bodies will say, you know what, we want you to do this. So at least financially, you're in a better position, and you've got something when you walk away from our sport. There's a lot more going to it, but this is what we've been working on. We spoke to Lloyds of London and massive pension schemes and savings schemes, and I thought, and we're almost there. When this comes about, this will be a little something that I think will not just be national, it will be international, because there are so many sad stories about mental health, fighters being broke, fighters, committing suicide. There's so many sad stories, and it's like a hot potato. Nobody wants to handle it or administrate it because they don't know how to handle it. I'm an ex-fighter. I understand what's needed, and you can only do so much, but it's making everybody accountable, because if everybody's profiting from our sport, then everybody must be accountable and somehow help the fighters that are helping everybody profit.
Gary, what do you think about what Johnny's trying to set up there and how that could change boxing?
I think aftercare is a key issue that I think every sport, but especially boxing, needs to address. I would say, to answer what needs to change in boxing, I think much greater knowledge and understanding of mental health. And I've seen a lot of boxers and I've seen a lot of athletes. They can't cope with what's known as transitioning, which is leaving their sport into some form of retirement. And at that point, when the music stops, the music dies, I think it would. I'm thinking about what Johnny's doing. It should be mandatory to see some sort of mental health professional to make sure those people are all right. That if there is a problem, they can ring the alarm bell and saying, something's not right there. Be that medical, be it a medical problem, be it a psychological problem, the dissolvement of a family, a divorce. Somebody should be seeing those people at the transitioning point to just check in with them and make sure they're all right.
Well, hopefully what you're doing is going to help along that way. Well, thank you, Gary, so much for your time. Really appreciate you coming on and discussing this with us, and Johnny as well, of course. Thank you for joining us in the studio.